Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to EWTN Live. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and we've got a very important show for you tonight. It's a very serious topic of human trafficking. And at first glance, you might think it doesn't have any relevance to you because of where you live, or your immediate circle of friends, or things like that. But the question that I would pose is, what if you could make a difference in one of these people's lives and help them become free of this modern form of enslavement? So we'll show you more about that. But before we do, want to introduce EWTN's Director of Online Services, Mr. Jeff Hahn, who is here to discuss a little bit some new ways you can access EWTN. Jeff, how y'all doing?
Good, Father Mitch. How you doing?
Fine. So, what is it you got up your sleeve this time?
So we'll be talking about Apple TV a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, really over the past 6 months, we have about 25 million people who watch us in some way, shape, or form. And whether that's on the
internet. How many people?
25 million over the internet.
Wow. Oh, just on the internet?
Just over the internet, yes.
Wow.
And so, in the past, we've talked about different forms, and this one will be Apple TV. And the biggest thing about this device is for those who don't have cable service, I have 7 children, it's very expensive, I'm on a budget. So through cable service, I can watch through Apple TV, I don't have to have cable. I can have internet service, I can watch EWTN Live on demand, I can watch this show tomorrow if I missed it. I can listen to radio shows.
How much does it cost?
This is the more expensive form of these type of boxes. It's $176. And so it can pair, if you're an Apple fanatic and have Apple products, you can have an Apple TV. This is compared to a Roku box. Roku has kind of been on the scene the longest in regards to over-the-top devices. There's Amazon Fire TV, and there's Apple TV, and there's Google TV as well.
So you can get one of these boxes, but you just pay for it the one time.
You pay for the box the one time. You pay for your internet service.
Right.
You download EWTN for free.
Right.
And then you can watch us live.
Yep.
And that's it.
All right. Pretty simple.
It's simple, Father.
But you can also tell you've got teenagers because they probably taught you how to do this.
Actually, I taught them, Father.
Come on.
I'm the one dad who's ahead of the curve. I'm ahead of the kids.
That's what happens when you watch EWTN. All right, Jeff, thank you for being here, and we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes with tonight's guest, Elizabeth M. Donovan, so please stay with us. All right, thank you and welcome back. Now, just want to give you some background. In 2017, there were almost 9,000 cases of human trafficking reported in the United States. And worldwide, there are over 40 million victims of human trafficking. This is a serious global problem. It's a form of slavery, and we have to make some sort of a response to this. Everybody, in particular Christians, need to take immediate action on these issues. Now, we have here tonight to give us some concrete ways of doing something is the director of the Human Trafficking Law Clinic at Ave Maria Law School, or School of Law, in Naples, Florida. So please welcome Elizabeth M. Donovan. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
It is
I'm glad
nice
to
to
be
have you here. Actually, we met, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was the speaker at the commencement for the law school.
Yeah, we were very happy to have you, and your
Yeah.
message for our grads was a wonderful message.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it was helpful. I enjoyed them and the faculty very much. It was a good school.
Yeah.
And how did you get started being involved in this kind of work? As because you're a lawyer,
Right.
but also you teach law.
Exactly. I am very fortunate in that I get to continue practicing law and teaching because I'm a clinical professor. And at Ave Maria School of Law, they have a commitment to helping people and doing good. And I had been teaching a clinic where I was representing undocumented immigrants who were victims of crime, an array of crimes. And then at that time, I started to have more and more clients who are actually survivors of labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So then my clinic evolved into focusing on assisting survivors of labor trafficking and sex trafficking.
One of the good things, one of the great things that Ave Maria planned on is it's in an area of Florida where there are a lot of farms. It was built on some old tomato farms, and there's a town not far away where people are extremely poor. And the university's made a strong commitment to serve there. But in regard to this issue, we have a clip that we'd like people to look at to learn a little bit of the background and facts on what human trafficking is about. So let's take a look at that clip.
Okay.
We didn't have a clear idea what was human trafficking until that happened to me.
I spent most of my childhood in the streets, having sex for money. My life was the system, my life was the streets. And I always say little girls don't dream of becoming sex trafficker or a prostitute. That's not what I wanted for my life.
I was sold in New York, Route I-95, up and down. It's happened in our backyard.
Human trafficking is a modern form of slavery that is real and alive all around the world, but also here in the United States.
Human trafficking is one of those crimes that occur in plain sight. Many of us go through day by day and we see people who are actually victims of human trafficking, but we can't identify that because we don't know what to look for. And many of the victims don't identify themselves as victims through psychological manipulation, physical intimidation, or just fear of law enforcement or the stigma that society may give them once they're identified as a victim of trafficking.
Very often when I talk to people who are not trafficking experts, they think that human trafficking is only sex trafficking. They think that it only happens to women and girls. They think it only happens because someone's been kidnapped. They think it only happens to people not from the United States. All of those myths are untrue. All people who are trafficked look like everyone. They speak every language, they have every educational level, they're of all races, ages, ethnicities.
The way the United States defines human trafficking is in 3 different categories. The first category is adults and children who are forced to work in some type of labor situation. The second category involves adults who are victims in the commercial sex industry. And the third category is children who engage in commercial sex, and because they're minors, there's no need for force, fraud, or coercion.
This is just touching the surface of the issues, but the numbers, 24.9 million is what they state here. Others say it could be higher, but it's not easy to get precise data in a lot of countries like China or India. They just don't have the numbers. And it's very important for us to realize it's happening here in the United States. This is where, you know, we might not be able to do global stuff, but we can address this in our country.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, it is happening here. It's happening all over the world. Virtually every country in the world is affected. They're either a country of origin, a country of transit, or a country of destination. And the United States is making an effort, but can do much more. And the United States is also making an effort diplomatically to work with countries around the world. And other countries are making progress, but still, we just recently celebrated the 70th anniversary of the United Nations proclamation of the Declaration of Human Rights, yet we're talking about millions of people being enslaved. Yeah. And Pope Francis has made this a very visible issue. He's made it a very important priority in his papacy. And one of the points he's made repeatedly is that there seems to be a lack of will.
A lack of will on the part of?
Well, on the part of governments, on the part of individuals, because for numbers to be that staggering. Now, something like this, a show like this, and viewers who are watching a show like this are key, because one of the problems is a lot of people don't realize it's happening and don't realize how prevalent it is. So the fact that people are learning about it, and then the important thing is that when someone learns something about it, they share it, they make a commitment. I'm going to tell 5 friends, 5 family members, 10 neighbors about what I've learned.
And, you know, on one hand, in the United States, and in Great Britain and France and other countries, slavery is outlawed on, frequently enough, on constitutional bases. That's an amendment to our Constitution, the 13th, is that right? And then in other countries got rid of it early. And so it seems, well, we don't have that problem anymore. And the last Western country to have legal slavery was the Empire of Brazil. And at the Pope's request, they got rid of it in 1880 finally. But that doesn't stop it just because it's illegal.
Right. I mean, having laws on the books is certainly a step, and more countries have put laws on the books. But there's a huge disparity between the laws and then how many arrests are being made, how many prosecutions are happening. And then also, we want to find survivors, but then once we find them, what kind of resources are we putting forward to help them, to make sure that they're not re-victimized?
Yeah, this is another problem, because if you let them go from their captors or manipulators, because they're not all in chains, are they?
No, and that's an important point. There are 2 things that people often think about with trafficking, neither of which is accurate. And one is that, yes, sometimes there can be a traditional bondage, something visible that you can see. Someone's locked in, someone is chained, but often it's just psychological control. Fear, intimidation, abuse, emotional abuse is used against either the victim or the victim's family.
Sometimes the people who bring folks from other countries, not only from Latin America, but people who bring people, especially women, from Eastern Europe, from Ukraine, Russia, Bulgaria, Romania. They bring them over and they threaten that, you know, you can't live on your own. You don't know this language. You have to do what we say. And those kind of intimidations go on. And besides, you owe me money for bringing you here, so you got to do this, or else I'll have you arrested.
Those are all good points, and those are all some of the ways that people are so vulnerable. And the traffickers use that against someone. They use their immigration status or their lack of immigration status against them. And then the other thing is that many victims are also not transported to other countries. Someone could be born in Birmingham, Alabama, never leave Birmingham, Alabama, but still be a victim of trafficking. And so the term often suggests there has to be movement, but it's really more about exploitation, not transportation.
Right. As a matter of fact, there was just a woman, recently a woman was released from prison who killed the man that had bought and sold her. And she ended up going to prison for years she was trying to defend herself. It was, I was absolutely appalled when I saw that story. That she was arrested and put in jail for trying to escape slavery.
And there's another case right now where people are seeking clemency in a similar situation. And that's part of what really needs to happen on this education level, that we need to start looking at trafficking victims as people who are victimized. They're not the perpetrators. They're the people who are taken advantage. Exactly. And we need to really start focusing on the actual perpetrators. Exactly. In sex trafficking, that would be the traffickers and the purchasers. And we need to start putting...
And by purchasers, you mean the men and or women who are using these slaves, these victims of sex trafficking. And they pay for the relationship, and they ought to be prosecuted as well.
Right, absolutely, because they are the perpetrators, and the stigma needs to be placed on them, not on the people who are being prostituted.
Exactly.
Be them men, women, children, boys. They are the ones that should not be stigmatized.
Exactly.
And so that's something that people can do, is this idea of seeking clemency in cases, particularly when it's a child. Also, there's been a lot of movement now to expunge the records if someone, especially as a child, was picked up, potentially arrested, potentially prosecuted for prostitution. We want to make sure their records are expunged. For adults too, if they were a victim, we don't want them to have this record that then impacts them, that they have to carry that burden for their life.
Because if it's on the record, it affects possible employment, sometimes voting possibilities, abilities to get loans, all sorts of things get affected by that. I'm going to give a little quotation, if you don't mind, from Pope Francis on this issue, where he said, and I quote, "Human trafficking is an open wound on the body of contemporary society, a scourge upon the body of Christ. It is a crime against humanity." That's from Pope Francis on April 2014, which was the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons that the United Nations promoted. And it's important that he speaks up on popes have. The popes spoke up against the African slave trade as soon as it began. Pope Eugene IV, back in 1436, spoke against it and put it under automatic excommunication. And that was repeated all the way through the 1880s.
The Catholic Church has long spoken out against this, and
Absolutely.
the Catholic Church has also actively engaged in trying to combat this. And sisters across the world have been instrumental for years in not only providing direct services to victims, but also in being very proactive in realizing that poverty, education, lack of job opportunities, and so really trying to help people to not be victimized in the first place, and then once they're rescued, to provide them with the services they need so they're not re-victimized.
That is a key issue, that a lot of times, especially in third world countries, or whatever they're called now, because there's no more second world, the communism has fallen, but in the poor countries, people will sort of, I think, half believing, half wanting to believe that when people come saying, look, let your daughter or your son come with me, I'll get them a good job, I'll feed them, and here's a refrigerator for your family, or a washing machine, or some appliance, or money. Said, look, you can't feed all your kids, so we'll take them. And they take them into slavery. But it's because the parents are so poor, they take that risk. Or kids who live on the streets. There was a movie, I think it was called The Lion. It was about an Indian boy who was adopted by an Australian family, but he was living on the streets in India, and men would just go to where the kids lived under bridges and in subways, and just capture them and sell them into sex slavery.
Yeah, well, Pope Francis has spoken a lot about this, about the fact that in the world we have all these people who, through poverty or lack of education, lack of access to job opportunities, are marginalized. And when people say, well, what can I do to combat this? Yes, there are tangible things to do to actually address human trafficking specifically, but there are these broader issues of living in a world where people can be bought and sold and can be used and discarded, and people aren't really thinking about fundamental truths and are just thinking about how can I get my needs satisfied immediately, how can I get this good for as cheap a price as possible, without really thinking through who's the person behind this. I'm wearing what I'm wearing, I'm eating what I'm eating. Where did it come from? Someone picked it, someone went to a factory and produced it. And people, I think, are starting to think about that more and more. And certainly in the United States, our federal laws have started to incorporate that. Just this month, another reauthorization act was passed, and that's part of what it's talking about. It's talking about looking at the supply chain and seeing where products are coming from. And if the Department of Labor finds that there might be slave labor involved in a product, they're required to report to the Department of Homeland Security about that product.
Well, in Catholic Charities around the country has been working for a long time to help the victims of human trafficking, whether for forced labor or forced sex. And there's a group of nuns that I've come across. I met them in Baton Rouge. I was doing a fundraiser for one of our radio affiliates in Baton Rouge, and I met these sisters. They are, taking care. Now they have a very secret location where so that they, the women and the children in particular, they're mostly dealing with women and children, but they want to make sure that they're not harassed by the former slavers. It's real risk. So, but if anybody's interested in knowing more about them, you can contact St. John the Baptist Church in Baton Rouge. I'm going to give that a phone number if you don't mind.
No, that's okay.
It's 225-654-5778. They, if you know people who need help, that's where they can go. Or they have a website, Metanoia /Inc. Not slash, but dash. So metanoia-inc.org. And they are rescuing these people.
That's wonderful, because that is the problem. Once you find a survivor, they need services. They need medical services, both physical and mental. They need education, perhaps job skills, perhaps language, and they need to get all the help they can to reintegrate back into society. And so the fact that sisters and Catholic Church and other individuals are starting to provide these services, and certainly a safe place to go, is an important element.
And, when you think about how many children are there, on one hand, the human traffickers have robbed them of a big chunk of their childhood, and if it's sex trafficking, they rob them of their innocence, but they are still not yet grown up, and they need a place to be able to grow up, as well as heal from the horrors that they've lived through.
And they need specialized care, and that's and there are incredible foster care facilities, and there are incredible shelters, domestic violence shelters for women or for men, but really this is a very specific kind of trauma that someone's gone through, and so ideally they're going to be placed in a facility that's designed for sex trafficking survivors, where they're getting the help from people who are specially trained in helping sex trafficking or labor trafficking survivors. And sometimes you can have someone who's a labor trafficking survivor who's also been sexually exploited at the same time.
Especially if they're children or women. More so the women and children than the men, but though they can be as well. And I think something, to keep in mind, that this affects maybe a bit over 40 million people globally. That's one of the estimates. And I have no qualms about making the contrast. As evil and horrible as the African slave trade was, that was 12 million people brought from Africa against their will between 1600 and 1810 or so. So over a 200-year period, 12 million. But right now, it's worldwide, it's over 40. It's worse. And all of us need to have an empathy with that horror and its after effects. We see how African Americans suffered so much long after slavery ended, unjustifiably. And this is also bound to be the case for the victims of human trafficking.
Yes, it's
25% of all the victims are children.
There are many statistics that put it, they're the most vulnerable among us. And when you have vulnerable people, sadly, you have people who are going to prey on them.
Yeah.
So.
Another area that I think is worth pointing out, I do this as a counselor and confessor. When people become usually a certain form of addiction to pornography, it's not just about what they're looking at, but they also need to keep in mind that a lot of those people are forced into the companies that do, whether it's phone sex or whether it's pornographic images, movies, pictures. A lot of them are the sex trafficking victims, are they not?
Yeah, no, the National Hotline has received calls on both of those areas, pornography, phone sex. And
prostitution.
Yeah, and people who are prostituted. And there's no question when you make a decision that you're going to try to normalize the objectification of people, then you are definitely giving up this idea that is someone really making a choice? Yeah. I mean, if you even believe someone's ever going to make that choice, you're always going to have victims because it's all fueled by the demand. And that's what a lot of advocates are really focusing on now, the demand side of it. It's just like illegal drugs, illegal firearms. If people weren't asking for it, then you wouldn't have it. So why are these children, men, women, boys, being coerced or forced into the sex trade? Because there's a demand.
Right. There's money to be made. The demand translates into billions of dollars.
Right, billions of dollars. And I think that's why Pope Francis has made the point a few different times that, in a way, we must all somehow be complicit in this. Because whether we're just sitting around and someone mentions, oh, I'm going to go to this strip club, are they challenged on that? Or do we think something like that's okay? Or if we just say, oh, I want to buy this product and I'm so glad it's so incredibly cheap, but we don't ask, well, why is it so cheap? Is it because slave labor has been used along the way? And I think that's a point he's made, is this complicity, and that we all need to start being a lot more aware of that.
And we have to go to a break, but I want to also bring out that what we bring as Christians is that absolute commitment to the fact that God made us in his image and likeness. Male and female, he made us in his image and likeness. And that Christ restores us to the dignity of the image of God. And if we don't stand up for the inherent dignity that is given directly by God to each individual, it is not mediated by the state. It's not mediated by people who are in business. It's not mediated by the communications media. It is given directly by God. And we have a God-given obligation to stand up for that dignity and against slavery.
Absolutely. I mean, human dignity is at the core of this, and human dignity flourishes in community, where each responsible for each other and the dignity that we each possess.
Exactly. Well, we're going to take a break. We'd like to get some of your comments and questions. So please give us a couple of minutes and we'll be right back with you. All right. Well, are you ready for some questions?
Sure.
Let's get you up. Start off with this young lady over here. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from Medford, Oregon.
It's a pretty place.
It's a beautiful place.
It really is.
But
I even got
apparently-
to go trout fish, steelhead fishing over there.
Oh, yes. Salmon
Pretty.
fishing is amazing.
Floating down the river.
Yes, I just like to eat it, not actually fish it. My question is, apparently Medford and Portland, Oregon are very prevalent for having a large population of trafficking. And it's highly publicized in the transit areas, even though transit's not obviously required. But how do I, as a passerby, recognize someone who may be in a victim situation? And what would I do? How would I approach them? What would I say, offer, do to assist that condition and try to change that?
Yeah, that's a great question because that is what needs to happen. People need to just be more aware. And so if you see a situation that makes you uncomfortable, because perhaps someone is with someone and it's not clear what the relationship is. They seem afraid of the person. They're not interacting with the person. Perhaps it could be a young girl or a young boy with an older person, and just something about it makes you think it's just not right. Then you can call law enforcement. It's not for you to get to the bottom of whether if it's an appropriate situation where you happen to see someone alone and you could say, are you okay? But in general, it wouldn't be so much for you to intervene. It would be more to think, I'm going to call law enforcement about that. You're in a restaurant and you are walking by the kitchen and you notice a lot of sleeping bags on the floor and it looks like people are actually sleeping in the kitchen. Perhaps there's an explanation for that, but it certainly seems odd. It seems unusual.
Yeah,
so
if
that would
there's
be
a snowstorm, they can sleep on the floor, but
right.
That's not normal in the kitchen.
Something would seem unusual. So I think a lot of people have these uneasy feelings, but because they can't think, oh, this is a crime that I'm aware of. I see a robbery happening, I see a battery happening, then people might be more apt to call. But here it's just something that's making you uncomfortable, but call. If you're driving down the road and you look up and you see barbed wire around a farm and the barbed wire's facing in, not out, you think, wait a minute, something's wrong. That shouldn't be trying to keep people in. It should be, so it's those little things, and it's worth a call, and then you let law enforcement sort out whether it's a problem or not.
So on one hand, pay attention to moments of discomfort, that something doesn't feel right. And then secondly, start observing details of what it is that is wrong with this picture.
Exactly. That's exactly what you need to do. And then fortunately, more and more, if you're in a profession where you're encountering or have a likelihood of encountering, then make sure that you're being trained. So more and more healthcare professionals are being trained, more and more law enforcement in the education field, people who could be likely to encounter victims, it's particularly important that they're receiving training. And more and more states are requiring and implementing that training. But if you're in a situation where you think, gee, I really think I should be trained or something about my workplace, then you should speak up about that. This new reauthorization bill is going to put a lot of money toward people in the airline industry, flight attendants, pilots, TSA agents, because they're in an industry where they might see people.
Again, it's that transference of folks, by flight. They don't walk here to America from Romania or Bulgaria. They have to fly here, and something doesn't seem right. We should pay attention.
Or even just if you're in a plane and someone's even just being transported from one city to another, or you look in your neighborhood and you see someone arrive and they enter a house of your neighbor and then you never see them again. They never emerge to go out to the store. If they're a child, why aren't they going to school? It's those kinds of things that if you notice, you should think about and then act on it.
Because they might be intimidated in some way or other to do work around the house for them.
Exactly.
Could be sexual stuff, but it could be just forced labor.
Right, it absolutely could be just domestic servitude, forced labor. And if you notice something like that, then that's worth a call.
We have a caller, in fact, online. Hello, Sharon?
Yes.
Hi, where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Pennsylvania. I have a 16-year-old granddaughter who was recruited into sex trafficking.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She was 16 at the time, and these traffickers intimidated and scared her so much, they actually had her go out to the streets and find other vulnerable young girls to recruit them in. She has now spent her last 3 years in the state prison. She's now 22. She may spend another 3 years there. What do I tell this girl? How do I help her?
Oh, I'm so sorry. This is the concrete. But what about her parents? Are they around?
My son passed away, and that was her dad. And her mom is, she's not the type of a structured mother that the girl needs.
Okay, so there's also, this is another common problem, that there's problems in family of origin as well. What would you say for a girl that she was sex trafficked and now she's in prison where you're victimizing the victim again?
Right, and I'm so sorry to hear this, and I'm glad that you called. And what's really important in a case like this is to make sure that the attorney or the caseworker or someone who's interacting with her is aware of her victimization, that was brought up at the appropriate time, that she was in fact being trafficked, because that can make a big difference. And sometimes it's not brought up or people aren't aware of it. And so I would really recommend to be sure that those circumstances are made apparent to whoever is in a position. And maybe at this point it could just be someone who she's speaking with at the prison, or someone who can be her support person. I don't know if you were in touch with whoever was her defense attorney when she was first under trial, or I don't know if she pled, but this is important because there is definitely more knowledge now about treating victims as victims.
There's also a place that if you know of a victim of trafficking, there's a national hotline, the National Human Trafficking Hotline.
Right.
Let me give that number and website. The phone number for that is 888-373-7888. So it's 888-373-7888. And online it's humantraffickinghotline.org. Humantraffickinghotline.org. Do they have legal services available?
The Human Trafficking Hotline doesn't provide legal services, but they are a good resource center that could potentially refer you. But more often what they're doing is taking in the calls and then alerting local law enforcement. So.
Yeah, and this is where hearing that story makes me think that there needs to be a group of lawyer volunteers, because these are poor people. They're slaves.
No, I mean, this is, as with many areas, there's definitely a need for legal representation that's greater than the attorneys. And there's many people who can't afford attorneys, or they're not eligible for legal aid for free attorneys, but they certainly can't pay for an attorney. And there are some pro bono attorneys out there. There are some agencies that will help provide attorneys, but the need is great. I mean, with the Ave Maria, our human trafficking law clinic, we're so fortunate in being able to help people, and we do provide them with legal services that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. But this is a call to talking to, if people want to be active in legislation, this is an example of how could something like this happen? How is a victim ultimately prosecuted and imprisoned? So that's a problem in the law that people are starting to look at more closely and realize these are victims.
You can also send a text, which in some cases, they're at such risk, they can't talk on a phone. They might be able to surreptitiously send a text, and that would be to 233-733. And if you get hold of that, you text help or info.
Yeah, no, they added that a few years ago, and it's been a wonderful addition, because making a call is not an option all the time.
That's right. Because they can't talk about it.
Right.
But they have 200 languages available for help, because they're not all English speakers, they're not all Spanish speakers. So this is very important. Sharon, first of all, keep you in our prayers, and you might also want to, could they contact Ave Maria's law clinic?
Sure, I'd be happy. She could absolutely
maybe find out if there's some other legal services available.
Just put my name in and it'll pop up. If you just type in Elizabeth Donovan, Ave Maria School of Law, and then my email will pop up, and I'd be happy to provide more specific advice.
Good. Yeah, that may want to try that, Elizabeth. I have another question. Of course, a lot of us know you. It's Paul Thigpen. Good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
I take you're doing some work, and then you're here in the audience. What's your question today?
It's very helpful to know what kinds of signs that we should be alert to, so that we might help someone in a problem situation. Are there other things we can do? Are there charitable groups that we could make donations to? Are there how could we have a practical way in helping to spread the word and educate other people? Are there other channels besides just being alert?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One thing you can do is you've already done by listening tonight. So now you know a lot more than a lot of other people. And so you can make a commitment to share what you've learned with other people. And anyone who learns anything about this, that's the way we'll spread the word. That's the way we make the work of the traffickers harder, because right now it's just too easy because it's happening and people aren't seeing it. Another thing you can do, and I always talk with my students about this, is you can pray. Pray for the victims, but also pray for the perpetrators, because it will not end when we have people who are willing to sell and willing to buy. Right. As far as causes to donate to, there are many Catholic agencies that are doing a lot of work in this area. I've worked with Catholic Charities for years. There's Catholic Legal Immigration Network. There's so many. And because Pope Francis has made this so important, a lot of churches are answering that call. And so that's one place to start, is to find out if your church is doing something, and if they're not, for you to start something. And it doesn't just have to be your church, it can also be another organization. And this is in terms of spreading the word. Sure. So you could say, oh, there's a committee at my church, or perhaps I am part of the Knights of Columbus or something else, and I'm going to, for example, think, what are the events in my community? I'm going to pick one event every 3 months. Maybe it's a art fair, maybe it's a marathon, maybe it's a Christmas market, and I'm going to commit to set up a table and have it be an awareness table. And I'm going to talk to people. That would be another way that you could actually spread the word. If you are interested in trying to change the legal system, and the examples that we just talked about, expunging records, also different kinds of zoning laws, or there's so many things connected with this issue, then you could find out what laws are pending and what you want to get behind, and write to your legislators on both the state and the federal level to try to change those laws. So if you can do any mentoring, often, not always, but often the victims are at risk, youth and young adults. So any organization, it doesn't have to be one that's specific to human trafficking, any organization that allows you a chance to mentor at-risk youth or young adults, that would be a way to help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, in some of these cases, you'll have young people who have no place to go, have nothing to wear, and no education. There may also be ways that you can cooperate with groups in helping to provide some of those very basic needs for children who are at risk because they don't have the family support. It doesn't exist. So those are some things. Take another call. We have Thomas. Thomas, where are you calling from?
Kingsport, Tennessee, Father.
Oh, great. Good to have you on. And what is your question?
Good to be here. First of all, I would like to say that I think it's fantastic that you are airing this, because I have to tell you, I never knew about this issue until 10 years ago when I saw the movie Taken. Oh. And, of course, my question to Ms. Donovan is, what percentage of women and men who are in this type of slavery, what percentage are taken illegally, as they were in the movie Taken, and what percentage submit themselves voluntarily and then find themselves in a situation they can't get out of?
Yeah, well, thank you for your call, and that's an excellent question. I don't have specific statistics on how many people are brought into this against their will in a violent way as depicted in that movie, versus how many people might be brought into a situation where they think it's going to look like one thing and then it turns into something else. The statistics are just so hard to come by because it's such a hidden crime, and because even many victims don't self-identify as victims. Even sometimes when a victim is rescued, they don't even agree that they're a victim because they might be so coerced and so manipulated by the trafficker at that time.
Well, you think of Patty Hearst, who eventually, what they call it, Stockholm Syndrome, where you begin to identify with your captor, that they have an effect that alters your sense of to whom you belong. And so a lot of those situations as well.
Right, and so I don't know the statistics, but what I will say is that both scenarios happen. Just in my work in my clinic, I've had clients that have been actually taken against their will in a physically violent way, but then I've also had clients that were coerced, or perhaps thought they were in love with someone who ended up turning on them and actually manipulating them. So both scenarios happen.
Yeah, the classic problem we worried about when I was a little boy is somebody offering a kid candy and then seducing them into a car or whatever. But so that's why we were told not to take candy from strangers. But we hear of regular basis kids playing in their front yard being snatched or on the way home from school. And then others, kids who are runaways, somebody just tries to help them, they think, and it's actually someone who's like using a piece of candy, saying, well, a place to stay, some food.
Right.
And then they get you into these other illegal activities.
Particularly for children. I mean, they're very vulnerable, and that
Right.
is a huge problem. We have a large runaway population, in even just looking at this country, we have a large runaway population, and if someone is walking around a bus station or leaving a train station and looking alone, they are going to be a target. Someone is going to find them. And it could be, it's not always girls and women. To just talk about sex trafficking for a minute, it's not only girls and women, but it often is. And suppose it's a girl and some man approaches him and says, oh, you're so beautiful. Are you new here? Where'd you come from? And she's so taken by this because someone's giving her attention and he's saying she's beautiful, and he says, well, let me take you to lunch. And so she goes to lunch with him, and then during lunch he says, do you have a place to stay tonight? And she says, no. Oh, come stay at my house. And then it evolves, and then perhaps they have a relationship, and she falls in love with him, and she feels protected, and she feels that he really cares about her. And then comes a day when he says, you know, we're a little short on cash. How about if you just have sex with my friend? And she would very likely say, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not interested in that. And he might say, well, it's just this one time, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't love you, and it's really, you do kind of owe me some money. And then it turns into the next person and the next person and the next person.
And it's that combination of enticement, pseudo-care, and manipulative guilt, so that you feel, they make you feel guilty if you don't. And that double type of manipulation gets somebody into it. So this is horrendous. I'm afraid, though, as important a topic as this is, we've run out of time. I just want to let people know, if you are a victim or you know a victim, please, please get hold of the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It's 888-373-7888. 888-373-7888. Or the website is humantraffickinghotline.org, or text help or info to the number, if you're just doing texting, to 233-733. 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days. Spanish, English, and 2 other languages. Thank you so much for bringing us this important issue.
Thank you for having me.
I've talked about it over the years, but you've done more systematic. And may Almighty God bless all of you and protect you, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.